Welcome to this explainer. We're embarking on a pretty fascinating mythic journey today. You know those simple moral binaries of good and evil we all grew up with? Well, we are going to uncover exactly how historical institutional powers flattened ancient, incredibly complex cosmic archetypes to create them. We'll be looking at how deep psychological truths and nuanced celestial myths were systematically reduced to literal tools for social control. It's an absolutely brilliant story of philology, psychology, and myth. So let's dive right in. Part 1. Echoes of the Morning Star. To really understand this transformation, we're dropping right into our story in media res. Imagine a dramatic conversation between two ancient celestial figures who are reflecting on their lost history. First up is the Ugaritic deity Atar. He's looking back and lamenting a massive historical misunderstanding. He basically says they look at the horizon and see only a fall. They have totally forgotten that he was the original architect. See, he was the one who first dared to scale the heavens, but not to conquer them. He just wanted to see if his light could fill the empty throne of the Ugaritic sky. But that natural cycle of cosmic ambition, later generations totally misunderstood it as just a mere fall. And then Lucifer responds. He points out how they took Atar's complex, tragic ascents, smashed it together with his own Latin roots, lux and frere, and wove the whole thing into a brand of shame. Why? Literally just to keep their social order tidy. He reminds Atar that back in the Greco-Roman sky, they were both the exact same neutral celestial marker. They were this beautiful beacon of unity, signaling that the deepest night is actually just the womb of the dawn. Atar hits the nail on the head here. He explains exactly how this happened, calling it the linguistic narrowing of the scribes. Institutions took their messy, completely uncontainable truth and actively flattened it into a really simple children's fable of disobedience. And the reason is pretty fascinating. They were absolutely terrified of the psychological shadow these figures represented. They just couldn't handle the ambiguity, you know? Wrapping up this dramatic exchange, Lucifer states their true original purpose. He says, let us remind them, we are the bridge they have repressed. We are the mirror. And that is so powerful, right? They prove that institutional light literally has no meaning without the darkness they inhabit. It's a perfect setup for understanding how language shapes who we are. Part 2. The weaponization of language. Okay, let's step out of the myth for a second and look at the actual etymology here. We've got to see how this linguistic weaponization played out over the centuries. Literally, the name Lucifer comes from the Latin roots lux, meaning light, and fere, meaning to bring. In the ancient Greco-Roman sky, this was really just a neutral celestial marker for the planet Venus, a physical light bringer. The focus of these early expressions was entirely on the natural synthesis of physical light arriving at dawn. It had absolutely nothing to do with being an entity of evil. So how did this original unity get fractured into such a strict moral binary? On one side, you have this incredibly nuanced meaning, complex cosmic ambition, a natural cycle, the original architect. But then, over time, through these really slow translation shifts, it got narrowed down. Institutional powers deliberately weaponized language to artificially separate these unified cosmic cycles. They took a tragic, fluid archetype and squeezed it into a strict binary of absolute good versus absolute evil. They basically turned it into a flattened children's fable of disobedience, using translation as social engineering to maintain order. Part 3. Thresholds and cognitive dissonance. This brings us to a super fascinating philosophical concept. The threshold bridges opposites. By existing in that ambiguous, fuzzy state between night and day, the morning star is the ultimate figure of the threshold. It acts as a beacon at the deepest hour. But here's the catch. It doesn't replace the darkness. It's a singular impulse reaching right across cosmic boundaries, bringing both knowledge and consequence in one unified motion. And this transitional state? It is a huge disruption to rigid institutional structures that absolutely demand you pick a clear hero and a clear villain. Existing in this liminal, boundary space does something really important to us. It externalizes cognitive dissonance. It actively resists simple, absolute categories and challenges those rigid structural binaries we were just talking about. And honestly, existing in that discomfort is exactly the psychological mechanism we need to trigger higher-level problem-solving and genuine wisdom. We literally need that friction to grow. Part 4. Integrating the Jungian shatter, which naturally leads us to how this celestial myth ties directly into personal growth and the Jungian archetype of the shadow. let's talk about psychological fragmentation. This is the damaging result of using rigid binary thinking to repress our dark, unconscious, or chaotic inner impulses. When we buy into that institutional pure good versus pure evil mindset, we force ourselves to hide our darker sides. And the result isn't some purified version of yourself. It's a fractured, fragmented psyche. The morning star, acting as the ultimate archetype of the shadow, directly challenges this dangerous repression. Because here's the thing, true enlightenment doesn't come from artificial purity. It actually requires facing your inner darkness. By embodying both transgression and grace at the exact same time, this threshold figure shows us that our highest potential is firmly rooted in our unconscious struggles. When we connect Attar's descent to the integration of our own dark impulses, we force our psyche to step outside of those lazy binary comfort zones. We have to admit that the messy reality of the human mind just cannot be categorized so simply.
Part 5. The Paradox of Descent.
This philosophy builds into a central tenet of the tradition known as the paradox of descent. It's this beautiful idea that the light that falls is the exact same light that rises. Its brilliance is inextricably tied to the darkness surrounding it. First, you have to leave your binary comfort zone. Step 2, you undergo a necessary descent into your unconscious struggles and the messy, complex material world. And finally, you evolve through genuine wisdom, and you return completely transformed. The fallen and risen stars aren't enemies, guys. They are mirrors reflecting the complex human experience. You simply cannot truly ascend without first navigating the darkness.
Part 6. The Fallen Mirror.
To perfectly illustrate this journey of integration, let's look at a brilliant historical parable, the story of the king's prism and the scribe's iron. Once upon a time, a great king owned this magnificent prism that sat right on the threshold of his palace. When light hit it, it fractured into a messy, uncontainable spectrum of colors. And the people absolutely loved it. They'd spend hours looking into it with deep psychological curiosity, finding mirrors of their own inner shadows and hidden strengths. But the king's high scribe feared the cognitive dissonance this was causing. People were starting to question the rigid laws of the land. So what did he do? The scribe took his iron tools and literally ground the prism down until it only had 2 flat sides. He declared it would now only reflect pure white for absolute obedience and total black for damnation. He trapped the original Lightbringer in a binary cage, completely replacing a complex cosmic cycle with a super simple narrative of disobedience. And that leaves us with a final, incredibly vital question. Are you going to remain safely in the scribe's binary cage, comfortable but totally fragmented? Or are you ready to look into the fallen mirror to face your own shadow? As you reflect on what we've covered in this explainer today, I want to challenge you to consider something. How might stepping away from lazy binary thinking and bravely navigating your own darkness be the absolute key to your greatest evolution?